Hi, my name's Drew, and today I'm going to be walking you through the Host Cascade. We're going to start right up front here on the corner talking about the Ryco wireless jack system. So, of course, in this video we have the liberty of having this Cascade on one of our shop trucks. When it would be time to unload, of course, we would need to swing these brackets out, these swing out jacks out to, of course, clear the hips there on the dually. So to do so, easy enough, we're going to go ahead and press here up on this acorn nut. That's going to go ahead and allow that to swing out. And sometimes you may have to help that back down as well to lock it. Of course, you do want to make sure that you are locking it in that out position. Of course, we would go to the other side. We do the same on that other front jack. So, of course, once we're in this position, it's going to be safe to unload the unit. Of course, if we forget to do that, we got to kind of start over because you're not going to, again, be able to clear the hips there of the dually. Moving on here, right up, first things first is going to be your Suburban furnace. Now, this is a propane burning appliance with a 12-volt blower motor, 12-volt direct spark ignition. So, biggest thing with this is, of course, this is going to be your exhaust vent here. Of course, let it exhaust. You're not going to want to restrict the flow, anything like that. One suggestion I can make is going to be the addition of the specifically cut bug screens for this appliance in particular, as well as all of the propane burning appliances. Here in Central Texas, mud daubers are attracted to the smell of propane. They want nothing more than to make this their new home. So again, I'm going to make that suggestion throughout the unit, but we do want to go ahead and protect these again from the intrusion of mud daubers and flying insects. Right next to that, we have your black tank dump there. Now, of course, we have your handle here, black means black water, standard bayonet style fitting here. Now, biggest thing with this, guys, we're going to want to keep this valve in the closed position. Reason being is that solid body waste, that toilet paper, all of that stuff that is going to be introduced into your toilet, we want to keep that in as wet or flowing condition as we can. That way it will easily evacuate the tank when it is time to dump. So keep this in the closed position. We're going to use the monitor panel on the inside, and we are only going to dump as necessary. When it does come to dump, we're going to go ahead and, of course, hook our sewage hose onto that. Now, this sewage hose is going to connect the very same way that cap comes off. So if we look here at the cap, you have two keyholes, and those correspond with the 4 prongs there on the outside. This particular setup, this cap or this bayonet fitting is slightly tight because you have it in this compartment, but it is definitely doable to either hook up a sewage hose or, of course, put the cap on like it is right now. Once you are hooked up, it's just a 6-inch pull towards you. That's, of course, going to dump that contents of that black water tank, so make sure that the business end of this hose is in the correct location. Moving on, right beside that we have that black tank flush there. Now, this particular setup, it's going to give you a nice caution here. What that says is that sewer valve must be in the open when using this inlet. So what that means is once we've went ahead and dumped our waste here, we're going to go ahead and hook any old garden hose to, of course, this black tank flush. We're going to make sure that valve's in the open position, and we're going to flush that out until we feel like we've done a good enough job. If you upgrade your sewage hose and you pick one with a clear elbow, which is going to be my recommendation, you can go ahead and use this black tank flush until you see that water run relatively clean at that clear elbow. Now, biggest thing with this is if you do have this valve in the closed position, you want to be very careful. There is nothing to keep that wastewater down in the tank. What would happen is it would overflow that tank and eventually transition at the rooftop septic vents. So be mindful, especially follow the manufacturer's recommendation of keeping this valve in the open position. So one thing I do want to talk about where we are here on the underside of the slide is going to be slide out maintenance. Now, once every 90 days, we're going to go ahead and treat these tracks here with a white lithium grease. You can see the gearing. We're just going to go ahead and spray those tracks down. We're going to run the slide in and out a couple times to distribute that lubricant, and we're going to be good for the next 90 days. Now, also on that same maintenance schedule, it's very important that we do condition these seals and these wipers here. What we're going to do is we're going to spray them down with a seal conditioner. And of course, keep in mind that you do have these seals all the way around that slide out. So it's not just here on the bottom, it is the entire outside of that slide. So we're going to spray those down with a RV grade seal conditioner. And again, you're going to wipe off any excess and then run the slide in and out a few times. Make sure they are nice and supple, staying in great condition. Moving on, we also have your city water connection down here. Now, water pressure becomes very important when we do talk about your city water. Oh my gosh. So coming down here, we have your city water connection. That's going to be what you're going to use if you're in the capacity of an RV park. You have access to full-time running water. Most important thing to note when we are talking about that city water connection is going to be the use of a water pressure regulator. Now these units are rated for a max water pressure in between 40 and 75 psi. In any event, we do need to use a water pressure regulator every single time we take the unit out. So this specific water pressure is going to hook directly onto the water source, and then of course we hook the spigot side of our hose onto that. And lastly, we're going to make our connection here at the camper by rotating that trailer bound connection. Very easy, should work for you perfectly in the event that you do use a water pressure regulator. So always use one of these guys. Also, moving on here, we have quite a bit going on in this generator compartment. First up, we have an outside shower, nothing too crazy there. Access to hot and cold water, has an on and off button there on the head to help you conserve your water consumption. And then right next to that, we have a couple 110 volt outlets there, excuse me. And then again, just finishing things up, we have a RG6 cable fitting. That's just going to be a pass-through cable connection to the designated TV area of the camper. So if you want to utilize that for a park cable service or an aftermarket satellite package, of course this would be the inlet of those services. And then we have a auxiliary propane line here. Now this is going to connect into your propane supply. This was useful for running auxiliary propane appliances. Utilizes that quick connect fitting. So what that means is you slide this locking collar back, you insert the male end fully, that's going to go ahead and lock on. Of course, then we need to turn that valve in the on position. Now you cannot connect or disconnect at any, with that valve in the on position as a safety feature. Now you may have noticed I skipped over this little cluster here. What this is your jack activation switch. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on, and we know it's on when we see that green light there. And then we're going to go ahead and look here at the jack remote. Now your orientation of this remote is going to be from the rear. Now we have your driver side front here, driver side front, driver side rear, passenger front, passenger rear, or all jacks at the same time, either lift or lower. Now all we have to do is make sure that green button is on, and then we have access to those jacks. You can see them running up or down as we go through them. In the event that this runs out of batteries, we can plug it directly into the jack activation switch. If we go ahead and look here, we have that remote cable switch. Utilizes a 3.5 millimeter jack to do so. And in your inside the unit, you're going to find a communication cord that would allow you to go ahead and make that connection. Also, you're also going to find a red remote. Looks exactly like this, but it's all red. What that is going to be your emergency only remote. So say you went ahead, you loaded the camper up, maybe you left this on the bumper, this is long gone, and you still need to unload the camper. So you're going to get that emergency only remote. Now that particular remote doesn't run on batteries, so there's no batteries on the inside. It will only work plugged directly into the jack activation switchboard there, so just keep that in mind. Also here in this compartment, we have your generator, of course. As you can see, I have that access panel removed from that. Reason being is I want to point out what this sticker says here, and it's just noting that there's a circuit breaker underneath that switch. That becomes very important because that's the outputting power breaker. So what that means is that breaker's famously soft to the touch. So what that means is it doesn't take much pressure to actually reset or trip that breaker. What we have seen is our customers will be going down the road, they'll hit a bump, and that bump is often enough to trip that breaker. What happens, they get to the campsite, they fire up that generator, and it runs, it starts up normal, but that transfer relay is never going to activate. So it's just never going to essentially output power. So in the event that that happens, just of course remove that panel like we have it now, stick your finger up there and make sure that breaker is in the up position. So see, even just reaching down here to make sure it was in the up position, I actually tripped it. So make sure that that breaker is in the up position and you'll be fine there. Moving on here, up top here we have your water heater. Now this is a dual source water heater, runs on 110 volt electricity as well as propane gas with direct spark ignition. Manufacturer has two very specific recommendations on how you operate it. First off, if the unit is going to be in storage for more than 7 days, it's very important that we purge the entire unit of water. So what that means is, of course, we're going to dump all the water lines, dump the freshwater holding tank, and then lastly we're going to drain this water heater separate. So we're of course going to focus on that part of it right now. We'll talk about the water lines and the water tank here once we get to the rear. So of course you're done camping. It's very important before we go ahead and try and depressurize and drain this that we do give it ample time to cool down, often a lot longer than you would think, at least 2 or 3 hours. Once you are certain of the temperature of this unit, we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut the overall inflow of water to the unit. So what that means is if we're using the city water connection that we saw down here on the wing, we're going to either turn that valve off or disconnect it from the camper itself. If we're using the potable water tank and the 12 volt water pump, we're just going to flip that switch in the off position. From there, we can use the hot side of any fixture to depressurize. And of course, this would be a good one to use since it is close here to the outside. So what we would do is we would grab your outside shower here, we'd make sure it's open. We're going to go ahead and turn the hot side of that spigot on. We're going to see a little bit of water come here, out from here. And what that is just blowing off the excess pressure within the water heater there. So with that, with that pressure relieved, we're going to be safe to go ahead and drain it. So when it comes to draining it, we are going to take an 1 1/16 ratchet, 1 1/16 socket, extension and ratchet, and we're going to go ahead and drain it from here. Now this is your drain plug. It's not only a drain plug, but it is also an anode rod. So what an anode rod does is it acts like a magnet for hard water deposits, calcification, things like that. They deposit on the end of that anode rod or onto the anode rod and eat away at that as opposed to the inside of the water heater. It is what we would consider a consumable part. Generally, I see most of my customers get in between a year or two in between anode rod changes. Of course, you're going to be well aware of the condition because every time you drain the water heater, you're going to take it out and inspect it and make sure it looks good. Now, it starts out 3/4 of an inch by 12 inches. By the time it needs to be replaced, it's about the size of a pencil and looks very, very decrepit. So that is something you're going to have to source from an RV dealer. Just take your old one in and they'll size you for the correct one. Other than that, manufacturer recommends before returning the unit back to service that we do go ahead and prime or pump 6 gallons of water into the water heater before using it. And what we're going to do for that is going to be a very similar process to depressurizing it, but of course we're going to make sure our anode rod is in place. We are then going to again use the hot side of the plumbing. We're going to turn that on. What we're going to see this time is we're going to see a very airy flow or spitty flow. We're going to see a lot more water, but that flow is going to be very interrupted. What it's doing is it's displacing the air within the tank here and refilling it with water. It takes about 5 minutes or less for that to happen. But once that flow normalizes at the fixture, that is our indicator that the tank here is full and we can start heating our water. As I mentioned, this is a dual source water heater. We're going to find both of those switches there on the inside. We can of course use both sources at the same time. That's going to give us the highest recharge rate. Next in terms of efficiency is going to be propane gas. Lastly, that 110 volt heating element is going to be the least efficient out of the two. One thing to note is you do have a on and off toggle switch here on the unit itself. We want to make sure that remains in the on position. It is just a redundant switch to the one on the inside. The one on the inside is of course going to be the most used switch. So we're going to keep that in the on position, use the one on the inside to actually turn the unit on and off. What we have here is going to be your gray water dump location. Of course, they utilize that same bayonet style connection here. This is where that sewage hose is going to connect when, again, it does come to dump your gray water. So now that we've seen where that gray water is going to actually dump there underneath the wing, we're going to point out the location of your bladex valve handle here. Again, just like we saw with the black water, you're going to dump this gray water with a 6-inch pull, of course in this case towards the rear. Of course, we have your power supply here. This is just a standard shop cord, but yours is going to connect the very same way. If we go ahead and remove that cord, you can see we have 2 slanted prongs and 1 L shape. We're going to go ahead and line those up there. With everything in line, it should plug straight in. Give it an 1/8-inch turn to the right, that locks it in. Then we do have a secondary collar here to screw down and lock it in further. One recommendation I make for every single unit that I deliver is going to be the importance of a 30 amp surge protector. With these larger units, we of course have a lot going on electronically. It's very important that we do protect those appliances from substandard wiring, surges, dirty power, things like that. Of course, the only way to effectively do that is going to be with the use of a surge protector. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. If you have any questions on the further importance or what products we recommend or how to use them, feel free to give our parts department a call. They would be more than happy to go ahead and educate you again on what we recommend. Now, of course, we have the basement door open here. One thing that I love about these hosts is going to be this slide out tray. This actually, you could load this up with gear. It does come full out. You know, just a tremendous amount of space there that you can take advantage of for storage. But from a user standpoint, you do have a lot going on here as well. So when we go ahead and look here along this wall, and let's see if we can kind of cover everything that is hooked up here on this wall. So if we go all the way to the rear of that compartment, we have your inverter. Both of the TVs in this unit are 110 volt TVs, and they are run off a inverted outlet. Right beside that, we have your transfer relay. Of course, that's what happens. That's what switches the generator on, or switches the availability for generator power to the unit. And then beside that, we have your Ryco Titan jack board. It is important to note that there are fuses on that board, and they may need to be changed. So if you have any problems with the operation of that jack, that gray box is going to be the first place you look to make sure those jacks aren't blown. And then a little further up, that metal box is going to be your converter. Now that's going to switch all your 110 volt power into 12 volt. That's how we're powering the 12 volt appliances while we are plugged into shore power. Lastly, coming up here is we have your water pump. Now we're going to spend a few minutes talking about that. If we go ahead and this is going to be a hard shot to get, but if we go ahead and look here at these valves, of course, this first valve we have that is connected to this white hose, that's going to be where we're going to introduce antifreeze into the system if we're doing a hard winterization process. What happens if we turn this valve into that secondary location? This actually becomes a vacuum line, and you could use that to introduce antifreeze into the system. Now, if we come further down here to this valve is a bit redundant, but if we trace actually the valve that's further down here on the floor, this valve, what that does is that's going to actually be your freshwater drain. So what you would do is you would just open up that valve. That line is running all the way to the front of the camper, and that's where we're going to drain your freshwater there on that valve. Now if I come up here to these two valves, these are going to be your low point drains. Those are going to be the lowest point in the unit's plumbing. Everything in between water source and fixture is going to be drained via these two drains. With these low point drains and that freshwater drain, everything is going to transition through the ground here, and if we actually lift this door up, we can see those water lines right here on the underside of the camper. So that's where all your water is going to be evacuated. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the manufacturer recommends that anytime the unit is going to be in storage for more than 7 days, that it is very important that we do go ahead and drain the system of its water. So kind of to bring that whole process back home, what we're going to do is we're going to drain the freshwater holding tank if it's been in use or if it's been filled up. That's that valve a little further back. We're then going to open up these two low point drain valves, and we're going to drain all of the water from those locations. Lastly, we're going to hop up to the water heater, and we're going to drain that the way, what we just talked about previous to this. So once we've done that, 99% of the water within this unit is going to be drained. That's going to be perfect for storing the units. Dependent on climate, that may be the extent of your winterization process as well. Moving up here, we have your rooftop ladder access. Very important to note that there is going to be structural maintenance. Again, we're going to focus on a 90-day maintenance schedule with the structural maintenance as well. As you can see on the body of the unit, anywhere where two pieces come together, they're going to utilize sealant. In this case, it's going to be a 100% silicone product. What we are looking for is any degradation in sealant, so any cracks, peels, any separation, anything like that, we want to make sure we catch as soon as possible. That's why we are going to be inspecting the unit every 90 days. Now, if we were to crawl up there on the roof, we're going to see roof transitions, septic vents, refrigerator vents, roof vents, things like that. They're all going to utilize a sealant up there as well. It's going to be a different product. It's going to be a self-leveling lap sealant. And again, we're looking for the same thing, any cracks or degradation in the ceiling. In the sealants, we want to make sure we touch up as necessary. Generally, with like a self-leveling lap sealant, you're going to lay it on thick. It's going to, of course, spread out over any of those issues. So make sure you're staying diligent on that 90-day maintenance schedule. We want to make sure we catch any water intrusion as soon as possible. Moving on here, entry door steps. These, of course, fold up. We fold up one more time, and then they just fold a third time, and then, of course, tuck in like so. To go ahead and pull them out, going to pull the first step out first, and then, of course, the second step usually comes with it. And then lastly, just go ahead and unfold them all the way down. Moving on here, we have your battery bank. Now your battery bank is made up of two Group 24 deep cycle batteries. These do carry some maintenance with them. What that's going to entail for you is once, again, every 90 days, we're going to go ahead and pull these vent panels up. We're going to check the water level, make sure that they are maintaining their water level. There's going to be a clear marked water line. We are going to refill with distilled water as necessary. So again, keep those batteries in tip-top shape by keeping that water level full. Again, slide out here. It's going to carry that same maintenance as we talked about on the other side. You have two 30-pound propane tanks here as well, held in place by a tension band, of course. In between the two tanks, you do have a switchover regulator. It's what we would call an automatic switchover regulator. So as you can see, it is directionalized towards the tank here on my right. As is, if we had both of the service valves of these tanks in the open position, what it would do is it would go ahead and use the entirety of this tank and then automatically switch over to this secondary tank. If we want to, of course, stop that from happening, what we're going to do is go ahead and close this secondary tank valve. In the event that that would happen, or in the event that we want to operate it in that capacity, we're going to, of course, keep this valve open. We're going to go ahead and use the entirety of this tank. This valve's in the closed position. So what we're going to have to do is that little black handle there, we just want to go ahead and switch that over to that secondary tank. Of course, then open up the service valve. While we're drawing off of this tank, we can go ahead and take this tank and have it filled. Refrigerator compartment here doesn't carry a lot of maintenance. What we're going to do is, again, a couple times a year, we're going to remove the vent panel. We're going to make sure everything looks good, make sure we don't have any frayed wires, separations there in the line, anything like that. We're just going to give it a visual inspection. More importantly is going to be the addition of those bug screens that we have already talked about multiple times throughout this presentation. We do want to keep any mud daubers or flying insects from nesting within this compartment. Keep in mind that you do have a vent here low, but we also have one up top there. We're going to want to make sure we do protect both vents with those screens. Now when removing or replacing these vents, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the tabs up first. Once we've done so, we're going to go ahead and make sure that these are seated properly, make sure everything's nice and flush. We go ahead and give these a turn. That's going to go ahead and lock it in. I always go back and make sure it is in fact locked in. A lot of customers have had these blown off. Generally, it's customer error. It could have been avoided if you just went ahead and gave it a double check to make sure it was in fact locked on. Of course, we have speakers here on the outside. We're going to get to the operation of those when we do get to the inside of the unit. Same with our awning here. I know you may not be able to see that in that shot, but we have the awning and the speakers here. We're going to get to those switches on the inside. Just going to take a look low here, make sure I'm not missing anything, and I think that just about covers it here on the exterior of the unit. We're going to hop on the inside and start taking a look at those features. So here on the inside of the unit, first things first is we have your fire extinguisher. Of course, very important piece of your safety equipment, and it is important that we do test all of our safety equipment every single time we take the unit out. In this case, we're going to push this green tab down. If it springs back, that means we have life left within the unit. It's ready to use. If that green tab were to stay depressed, it's time to pull out the unit and recycle it and of course buy a new one. Down low here, quite a bit going on. We have your battery disconnect switch. You're going to utilize that anytime you're putting the unit into long-term storage. What that's going to do is that's going to isolate those batteries that we saw there on the outside from the 12-volt system. With any 12-volt system, you're going to have nominal or phantom draws within that system. From the day-to-day, it's no big deal, but of course in this scenario, compounded over months of storage, they're going to start to wear and tear on the battery. So again, anytime you're storing the unit, go ahead and disconnect this battery. Of course, we can see here, if the key is removable, that's going to be disconnected. We go ahead and put the key in, you see the lights turn back on, we are connected. We have your slide room in and out switch here. This particular one's going to be for the kitchen slide, so we can see that come in or out. And then this other one's going to be for the driver's side slide there. So you can see that go. One thing to note is you want to make sure that that bathroom door specifically, and you'll see why here later on in this presentation, we want to make sure that that is fully in the open position. So we don't want to crunch that door when we do bring in that slide. So something to be aware of there. We have a light here. Now this is going to be a courtesy light. This is a switch, a common switch you can hit coming into the unit to light your way to gain you access to the rest of the switches. And then we have your awning in and out switch here. Now that awning is going to be on the passenger side of the unit, of course when it is on your truck. And we can kind of choose how far out we run that awning depending on how long we hold the switch. One thing we want to make sure is that we do not overextend it. What would happen if we reached that max extend position and kept holding that button? It's actually going to roll in backwards. That fabric should always be on top of the roll. If it is underneath the roll, that means that it's been overextended and essentially rolled in backwards. So just keep that in mind. Now coming into the unit here, right above my head, we have your wine guard antenna. Now this is designed for digital over-the-air television. What we're going to do is we're going to rotate this and directionalize it to bring in the best signal possible. From there, we're going to, of course, do a channel search. It's going to bring in any digital programming that is available. Of course, turning around here, we get your high point three-way oven, convection, microwave, and grill. I really love these appliances. You have a heating element there on the top, and other than that, it's going to be convection in a regular turntable style microwave. Down below here, we have your cooktop. What we would do to light this is we're going to go ahead and turn that to high light, and you just hold that knob down. That's going to turn that piezo igniter on. Cabinetry here is going to utilize these push button locks. So of course, when we're going down the road, to make sure these drawers aren't flying open, we need to lock them. So make sure you shut the drawer fully and then go ahead and push that knob in. We have your water heater switches here. As earlier noted, we can, of course, run both sources at the same time. That's going to give us the highest recharge rate, or we can choose them individually. Now, this red light comes on with the propane side of that water heater. That is essentially our indicator on whether or not the appliance has lit. You may see that light cycle on and off as it's going through that lighting cycle, but if you come back 5 minutes later and that light is still on, that means the water heater has failed to light. Could happen for a multitude of reasons, but generally you're either out of propane gas, or it just hasn't made its way to the appliance, or the valve on that tank is in the closed position. Those are generally the usual suspects. In the event that that happens, just go ahead and check, make sure your tank is on, make sure you have propane in the tank, and then come in, turn the switch off, turn it back on, and it will recycle again. It'll try and light another 3 times. Other than that, we get your fixture here in the kitchen. Different spray options are available with that. Does have a pull down as well. Of course, you have a countertop extender, which is going to, if we remove that, you can see the larger bay of the sink there. Here on the lower side here of the countertop, we have your GFI outlet. Now, all the receptacles here within this unit are on the same circuit. What that means, if one of them were to get overloaded, it's going to trip at this location. If we see that red light, that means it has been tripped, and it's we need to reset it. So we're going to push the red button, or the white button, excuse me, to reset that. Now, dropping down low again, we have your carbon monoxide LP leak detector here. This is a 12-volt appliance, so there is no battery to change, but it does have a test button, and we are going to want to make sure that we do test it every single time we take the unit out. Moving on further into the unit here, we have your Dometic refrigerator. Push buttons here to actually open the unit up. Very indicative of what you're probably used to seeing with an RV style refrigerator. But up here we have your controls. We turn the unit on. It goes through kind of like a boot up procedure. It's going to generally fall into the last saved setting, which in our case was auto AC. On auto, it's going to, of course, default to AC voltage first. If it fails to find AC voltage, it's going to try and light on gas. Now, if we want to go ahead and light it on gas, we hit that second button. It's going to cross over here to illuminate that gas light. And of course, as long as it lights up properly, it's not going to illuminate this check light. If there is an issue, you'll see that check light illuminate. And then we have your temperature control here. The higher up on this scale, of course, the colder the unit is. 9-volt smoke alarm here. We'll make sure you get a battery in there. Biggest thing with that is, of course, number one, make sure there's a battery in it. And number two, make sure we test it every single time we take the unit out. So we want to make sure it's in good working order in the event that we do have some sort of emergency where we need the smoke detector. I'm also going to go one step further, and I want to make sure that you do keep a spare battery with the unit in the event that that does start indicating in the middle of the night. It's not going to keep you up. You have another battery to pop in there and make sure you're protected. Now we also have these recliners here on the unit. You have storage in between, cup holders, really cool setup. But here on the side is the handle. You go ahead and open those up, and you got the same here. Now these take a little bit of pressure with the leg, just like any other recliner, to go ahead and seat back properly. So right above my head here, we have your max fan. Now, of course, this will be in the locked position when it's closed. To open it, we're going to go ahead and pull that knob down. Of course, rotate it in the direction that we want to open it. It is obviously already open. From there, we can go ahead and turn it on with this button here. Now we can directionalize the airflow, whether it be in or out. We can control the volume of air that is being moved through that fan. We can even set a thermostat there. So that's going to set a thermostat to 78 degrees. It will kick on and off to maintain that temperature through the allotted time period. Now, of course, when it's time to pack up, it's time to go back down the road, we do want to make sure that we do close this. I often make the joke that it's something that you forget once because it's probably not going to be there when you get to where you're going. Once we have cranked that down and closed it, we do push up on that handle till we hear that click. That's going to make sure that that's locked down. Now, kind of changing gears here, we have a couple switches here on this side of the paneling. This one here is going to control the satellite there on the roof. So there is a built-in line guard satellite, and that's going to turn that on to start directionalize it. Of course, that carries its own, its own service manual and things like that. Of course, if you already have one of those satellite providers, you'll go ahead and have to set that up for that specific provider. And then down below we have your inverter panel here. Generally, what they use the inverter for most in these host units are going to be the televisions. Of course, this is going to give you real-time readout of where you're kind of sitting on input and outputting voltage, what your battery looks like, things like that. So keep in mind that if you are going to turn on the televisions, this does need to be in the on setting. Behind the TV, very hard to see with the TV in place there, is going to be your thermostat there. This is a Dometic thermostat. It utilizes the captive touch. What that means is we go ahead and these aren't actual buttons, they're more of like a touch screen. So when I go ahead and turn that on, my first selection that I need to make is going to be fan speed. My choices are low, high, and auto. If I go to either low or high, that fan is going to run indefinitely no matter what my temperature is set here on the thermostat. To keep it right with me with my choices, I want to go ahead and kick that into auto. That's going to operate, more like a traditional thermostat. With that fan speed in auto, I go ahead and hit the button again. That's going to take me into the actual air conditioner mode, noted there by the snowflake, and it says cool, I believe. That middle section is noting the fan speed, which we just set to auto, and that thermostat is set to 62 degrees. If I wanted to change that temperature, I can go ahead and kick that up or down there. If I hit that mode button one more time, that's going to go ahead and take us into furnace. Now, if I would have chose either low or high fan speed, that air conditioner blower would have still ran even though the furnace was kicking on. So once it kind of catches up with what I'm trying to do, it's going to kick that air conditioner blower motor on, or off, excuse me. It's going to go ahead and kick the blower motor for the furnace on. 16 seconds after that, it actually ignites. By that 30-second mark, it's producing noticeable heat. And now, as these furnaces run, their efficiency rating goes way up. It takes about 15 minutes for it to actually achieve that max kind of efficiency rating. What that means is within the first 15 minutes of operation, it may set off the smoke alarm. So something to keep in mind, definitely not something to be alarmed of, again, as long as it is within that first 15 minutes of operation. And lastly, if I hit that mode button one more time, it's going to go ahead and turn the unit off. If we give it a few seconds, that blue light display is going to time out and turn down. Now coming over here, starting down low, we have, of course, your fireplace here. If I go ahead and turn that switch on, I hit the on-off button. Of course, we can see those fake logs come up. This does also have a heating element back behind there, so it can run as like a space heater kind of setup. You really have pretty much full control over the brightness settings, as well as the temperature of that heater, time and temp, things like that. Up top here, we have your Jensen stereo unit. This is going to essentially be your multimedia center for the unit. CD, DVD, AM, FM radio, Bluetooth. All of those features can be utilized through this specific unit. For watching a DVD or listening to a CD, we of course just insert it there into the slot. If we're going through any of the other modes, we're going to do that with this mode button here. On-off button is here. One thing to note is the zones. Now, we saw those outside speakers there when we were doing that part of the presentation. You're going to control the volume separate. So you have zones in the bed area. That's going to be, generally zone A. Here in this living area, that is generally zone B. And zone C is generally outside. Now, don't quote me on the locations of those zones, but what I'm getting at is you have 3 zones. You're going to control the volume of each zone separately. You're going to do that by operating this switch here. Other than that, it again carries its own service manual. If you have any questions or concerns, just go ahead and note that manual or give us a call. We can walk you through this unit over the phone generally. And then above that, we have a charging station. That's going to house a couple USB chargers there, as well as a 12-volt cigarette lighter style receptacle there. Makes it easy to charge any of your devices or run any 12-volt appliances. And then again, TV, just another reminder, inverter does need to be on for that television to turn on. So once that inverter's on, go ahead and hit that button. It should power up like normal. So a lot of our controls for the unit are going to be housed underneath this kind of fake cabinet here. So if we lift that up, first up is going to be this light switch cluster. Of course, clearly marked in terms of function. Porch lights, of course, going to be the porch light. Area light are going to be those under wing lights you may have noticed when we were doing that presentation outside. Awning light is an LED light strip that runs the full length of the awning. Up top here, we have your micro monitor. That's going to give us a real-time readout of where our tanks sit as in level of full. This is how we're going to know when to go ahead and dump our tanks. Gray water is empty, black water is empty, fresh water is 2/3 full, and our battery is full. Now our battery is going to read full anytime we're plugged into shore power. To get a true readout of where our battery sits, we're going to need to unplug from shore power and go ahead and test from this location. We also have your power control center here. Everything we see here on the right side is going to utilize a replaceable blade style automotive fuse. Not a bad idea to pick up a variety pack of fuses, keep them with the unit. In the event you need one of these on the road. Everything there on the left side is going to utilize a resettable light switch style breaker, very much of what you're used to in your fuse panel breaker box at home. Door has some tabs. We line those up, allow that to seat properly. Now we have your generator switch here. Of course, we saw that the generator itself has a onboard switch, but this is going to be the most commonly used switch. What we're going to do is we are going to hold that in the stop position or prime position until we see that light there. We're then going to cycle up here to the start. We're going to go ahead and light that generator up. I'm sure you can hear that running in the background. You may have seen those lights flicker. That was that transfer relay taking over. We are now running this unit entirely on generator power. So one thing to note is very important when it hasn't been lit for a while or ran for a while. We want to make sure we don't over crank it. So when you're going ahead and you're cranking it, kind of be counting in your head. Don't let that over crank for more than 10 seconds. Of course, that generator does have its own service manual. It's going to outline maintenance schedules and things like that. I highly encourage you to check that out and stay on top, essentially, of the maintenance of that generator. Moving on here into the restroom. Now this was the door that I mentioned earlier that it's very important that this is kept in the correct position. So if we close the door like so, and we go ahead and bring that slide out in, of course this whole wall is coming in. So it will damage that door, it'll damage the wall. Make sure it is in its resting position here against the shower curtain, and it does have a magnet that keeps it there. So again, make sure we're doing that. Here over on this side, we get, of course, a porcelain toilet bowl there. Has a pedal flush. It's going to be, if I can find it, it's going to be a light press to fill up the bowl, light press to fill up the bowl, full press to flush. Very important that we use deodorizing products as well as tissue dissolver, RV grade toilet paper. That's all going to be introduced, of course, from this location. When storing the unit, go ahead and store it with the toilet treatment in place. What that's going to do is keep things nice and fresh while it is kind of sitting stationary in the sun. Of course, other than that, when it comes to using the unit, when you first pull into the campsite, go ahead and introduce your toilet treatment here. Generally, you're going to wash it down with some water. I recommend following the manufacturer's directions of the product that you're using. Behind me is going to be the shower. Again, not exactly sure how we're going to capture this, but if I shut the door, I just wanted to show you this kind of projector style shower curtain. There's no real latch that latches it here on the other side. It just is like a pressure thing. So if I go ahead and push it over here, you can see that I need to hold it because it's like a projector screen where if I let go of it, there's a lot of spring tension on it. So I just push in. That allows me to go ahead and close it. Now, one thing here, we have it on off here on the shower head. What that's going to do is help us conserve water. Valves here, of course, like a straightforward standard shower there. Above my head, we have an exhaust fan here. We can go ahead and open that up. This is a standard kind of RV style exhaust fan, 12 volt exhaust fan, I should say. So the design of this table is pretty cool. I really enjoy it. It's going to kind of lock in that stowed position. Of course, this from here, we can go ahead and bring that slide in. It's going to be in that correct position. Now, when it comes to actually utilizing it, it's kind of like a magnetic or spring latch almost, where it stays in that locked position. But when we actually want to use it, we can go ahead and slide that out or unlock it. Now, I believe also you can actually rotate this as well and give you even more room there in that position. Of course, from there, it can be adjusted this way as well. All right, so to make out this secondary sleeping area, of course, we have to remove the dinette table. As you can see, this is on a slider. It'll slide back and forth. Has some latches there to keep that in place. When you're bringing these slides in, it's very important that this is in the inward position. We actually have this, you know, it is positionable, but this bar here is going to need to be facing this way. That's going to keep everything, that's going to give you the most amount of space here. So make sure that that is oriented properly. Now, when it does come to make out that secondary sleeping area, we're going to kind of switch gears here. So we're going to remove the table here. And it does take a little bit of pressure, and we can go ahead and move that over to this flange here. So once we've done that, we can go ahead and make out this space here. We're going to do so by folding these guys out there. That will allow this to come over, and from there we do something like that. That's going to, of course, give you that secondary sleeping area. Very easy to do. Coming here into the bed area, of course, not too terribly much we need to spend a lot of time on. Of course, you have reading lights and such here on this end. We have a couple 110 volt outlets, USB chargers, and cigarette lighter style receptacles as well. That's all pretty self-explanatory, but one thing I did want to touch base on was going to be the operation of the hike vent. When we open it, we have a safety release here. We're going to push that in. That allows that that handle to come back. And then, of course, when we go ahead and shut it, we need to make sure that we push that all the way up past that plastic. Now, when that's open, we have the screen there, and we have the privacy shade there. So, of course, back here, again, a lot of kind of stuff we've already seen. You have a TV. Again, a reminder, the inverter does need to be on for even this TV to work. Other than that, I know it's pretty kind of self-explanatory. You have your cabinetry, things like that. So that just about covers it here on the interior of the unit. We really hope you enjoyed the walkthrough throughout the host Cascade. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Thank you.